Hello and welcome to episode number 18 of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast. Today is Sunday, October 5th, 2014. I'm Melissa Agnes, and this podcast is brought to you by Agnes Day. Let's talk crisis intelligence. Hi, Jean-Michel. Welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
My name is Jean-Michel Ghoussoub, and I'm the owner and client service VP for U92, an interactive agency.
Cool.
That's
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, that's what you do. Yeah, who are you would be a very long...
Yeah, it's a longer story.
Longer answer. So when we were talking about recording a podcast together, you had an awesome idea that I really liked. And I'm gonna say the idea, and then I'm gonna ask you two questions. So one and then the other. So your idea for a podcast, which I really liked, was how an interconnected world imposes transparency and how that those who don't understand that are bound to deal with crisis management on a regular basis. So definitely a topic that's up my alley and that piques my interest. So I've got two questions for you that I thought we could start the conversation with. So the first is, what does it mean to be truly transparent? Because I think that transparency is a buzzword that's kind of lost its meaning and probably confuses a lot of people. It scares a lot of others. And the second part of that question is, how does this interconnected world impose transparency onto organizations?
Yeah, but to be transparent for me is quite simple. It's just to say what you do and do what you say. I have a friend in California, Jean-Claude Brouillet. He used to say something that made me laugh all the time. It was like, the longest distance in the world is the one that separates the mouth from the wallet. And when you think about it, we're a verbal species. We talk a lot, and most people, they pay attention to what you say. But sooner or later, they will pay attention to what you do. And I think most people tend to forget that. They think that because they said something, it's okay. But people, sooner or later, they realize that very few people walk the talk, and these are the people that they are the go-to people for a lot of other person. That the person you can rely on are the person when they say something, they will do it, and something that is exceedingly rare, and it shouldn't be, because now, like I said, in an interconnected world, it's very easy first to go back in time and see, okay, you said that there's an email, there's a trace on Facebook, on LinkedIn, whatever. When you say something, there's a proof that there's a trail that you leave behind. It's easy to verify, but also when you do something, and let's say you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, you break a deal or anything like that. Back in the days, it was easier, especially in a big city, to get away with it. But now, because people are connected, if you piss someone off, excuse my language, but it's very easy for that person to tell, 500 people, in a few seconds. So it always paid in business to be transparent and to be honest. But now more than ever, you have to be very careful. And if you're a good person, if you deliver quality, and if you're consistent, my God, the rewards will be just incredible. But if you have a tendency to be dishonest, or just to be lazy in your ethics, I would say like that, you'll pay sooner than you expect, and it's changing fast. For example, in our business, 90% of the business we get, it's referrals. It's people calling us because someone told them we're good and they had to do business with us. So it's 90% of our business. And back in the days, it was a lot. It was maybe 60, 70, but the percentage went up in the last years. So I think for us, it's something you have to do. There's no excuse. It's not something you can compromise on, because not just for your person, but just for your business. Your business will suffer if you tend to compromise on that.
I agree, absolutely. And the other thing is that, or what I would add is that transparency, a big part of that is honesty. It's also a matter of, you can be honest and do what you say and say what you do, but not be the level of transparency that is required, especially when you get into a jam.
You're right. In transparency, there's also an extra mile. You can just be I'm legit. I'm doing the minimum. I said that I'm going to do that, but your intentions are maybe hard to measure. But when you enter into a relationship with someone, it could be for example, business relationship, it could be a personal relationship. You set expectations. The things that you say and things you don't say that people expect. And if you want to be totally transparent, you have to be very clear on that and follow up on that. It's easy to say, well, that's not exactly what I meant. And a lot of people play on that. It's not actually totally dishonest, but it's not plainly transparent either. So it's a fine line.
Yeah. And it's also an expectation today, which is what I think you mean by when you don't understand the implications and the expectations of transparency and what the interconnected world imposes on us, that you're going to find yourself in some hot water.
Of course, and also on the opposite, you can have a very good support just because you've been like a person that has been transparent over time. I remember walking into a room with a lot of people, and they would say, okay, they were expecting me, and everything I would say, they were, okay, well, we trust you, but you don't know me. But so many people like introduced me in a positive manner to these people. They were like, whatever I was saying, it was gold to them. Just because a few people spoke very highly of me, and it happens a lot. I think on the opposite, if people have a tendency to tell other, that person, they're good, but they're not exactly transparent, and it will have an impact on your business. No one will tell you, but you will feel it when you get someplace. And especially now with LinkedIn, it's very easy to do background checks. You open up, before you meet with someone, you open up LinkedIn and you see, okay, well, we have 35 connections in common. It's very easy to call these people and, tell me more about that person. Maybe you wrote a recommendation on LinkedIn for that person, but what do you think really? And they will tell you, he or she is good, but, and then the but makes all the difference. And I know because we hire a lot of people these days, and recruiting is hard in our business. But with LinkedIn, and we try to choose the right person. LinkedIn helps us a lot because we can call for references. People, they don't tell us call these references. They're the references we choose through LinkedIn, and it makes a big difference. Back in the days when you apply for a job or you wanted to sell something, say, I can provide you with 2 or 3 references. Call these people. Now you don't have to ask for it. You just go on LinkedIn and you choose the references. So it's a bit different, and it's more important than ever to leave a good impression on the people you deal with.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't think I've been actually getting references from somebody for something that I potentially might want to hire him for, and in the back of my mind was always, okay, these 3 people that I've spoken to, they say great things about you, but he chose them.
Yeah, so exactly.
It's a good. I'm going to go back and use
There's
that.
a bias there.
Yeah, and obviously you think that if you have a recommendation from somebody on LinkedIn, as an example, you hope that person too, who left the recommendation, is transparent themselves and honest, and that they're actually meaning what they say.
But sometimes it goes further than that. Before you meet someone, you go on LinkedIn and you see them and you see who they mingle with on LinkedIn, and in the industry, who is good and who is not. And if you see, okay, that person is dealing with all people that are not respected in the industry or not as transparent or not as good, even before the interview, you have a bias for that person before he or she walks in the door, because you just form an opinion based on the relationship that person has on LinkedIn, or it could be on Facebook, it could be elsewhere. But if that person leaves a good trace, then it will play out in that interview, because then you can really assess. Again, you go double check, but sometimes you can start with a strike or 2 just because of your connections, because they were not transparent.
It's true. So looking at communications at transparency as a communications model, and being somebody who owns a web agency, corporate, I'm going to 2 parts to this question. The first is, do you think that transparency is something, we're talking right now very much professional to professional, but when you look at the bigger picture and you're looking at the organization who needs to communicate in moments of heightened expectations and risk, that you need to have that level of transparency as well. Do you think that it needs to be a structure or a part of the corporate culture of the organization to be transparent? It's the first part of the question. The second part would be, in your experience, how do you go about doing that when you don't control what all of your employees, who they are and what they may say and may not, and their own social graph and all of the variables that we have today with social media?
It's a very good question. Actually, two very good questions, because there are two questions in there, but it's very relevant. The first one is in corporate culture, it's a lot of people think that you cannot tell the client everything. Same thing for your employees. You cannot tell them everything because then, business would fall apart if they know everything. I think quite the opposite. I think you have to be totally transparent. And the way we do business, and I think it's the way a lot of people will do business in the future, it's going to be a long-term relationship. Because in a stable world, it's easy to choose from one vendor to the other and compare apples with apples. But in the world as it's changing really fast, we have an overload of information. You want to rely on people you can trust, and that makes all the difference. So if you want to trust people, you want to develop a long-term relationship with them. So for example, if we work with a client and we're like 20% more expensive than other vendors, if they know us and they trust us, they know there is a reason why we are 20% more expensive. Maybe we know their business better than the others. Maybe we do better quality, but there's something, and they just want to assume, okay, they're 20% more expensive. I'll let them go. And I think in a world that's changing really fast, you have to trust and rely on people, and more than ever, and you have to have transparency on both sides. Like back in the days, like 15 years ago, when I was working in the printing industry, it was very different because it was a mature industry, and the clients, they knew exactly what printing company would do better than the other. This one is better quality, but it's more expensive. This one is like average, but they're fast, and everything was mapped out in their mind. And they would call me and say, you know what? I know my project, I know you will print it this way and this way. They knew exactly. So there were no unknown. Now it's very different. Clients, they come to us and I have a budget, but I'm not sure. Is it a marketing budget? Is it a communication budget? I need to work on both, and my competitors are doing stuff that I don't really understand why they're doing this, and they risk their jobs by doing complex projects. So now they have to rely on people they can trust. But what we see and what we go through at our agency is becoming a trend outside the communication world. It's becoming a trend everywhere because we have, like I said, we're drowning in data. We have to have people that we can trust and rely on. So if you want to build a long-term relationship, you have to deal with people you trust, and that takes a long time to create. That's the first part for me. I think I wouldn't do business with people that are not transparent. If I find that a client is dishonest and I cannot build a long-term relationship, even though they're giving me money, I will part away with them because it only spells problem in the long run. It might be a bit extreme the way we see it, but it paid us like very well over the years. And I was just before this call, I was on the line with a client I've been working with for 14 years, as long as I had the agency. And there was a complex problem, and I was totally honest with them, and they were totally honest with me. And that way we reached an agreement. But I had to tell them stuff would go through at the agency that other business owner would be scared to tell their clients, but I was totally transparent with them, and they appreciated it. And they told me their reality, and I was able to understand, and they were totally transparent. They even told me, like, on the budget, that's the max we can go for this and this reason. So I knew their exact budget. Very few clients are willing to tell you their exact budget, even with the buffer. So that's one part of your question. Please remind me the second part, because I've been speaking for so long. I forgot the first part.
No, I like what you said. Basically, and as you're talking about your own example, like that you just got off the phone with your clients, I'm thinking that this is a client that knows that they can trust you to be transparent with them because you have this relationship with them, and you're proving it even after 14 years of having this relationship with them. And if this mini crisis that happened internally, whatever it may have been, it's the only way to come out of it where both parties are winning and the relationship continues to build on a mutually beneficial platform.
Exactly.
In that direction. The second part of the question was, so first was, does it have to be part of the corporate culture? And second was social media.
Okay, I remember your question was, how can you make sure that your employees, they follow through?
Oh, yes, you're right. There you go.
I'm so good. The thing is, you have to set it up as a culture. And if you're not totally transparent with your employees, it's hard to tell them to be transparent with the clients. But also, they will model their behavior and what you do. if they're in a meeting with you and you're being totally honest with the client, they will have a tendency to be honest with you because that's the type of behavior you reward at your agency or at your company. And if you reward that type of behavior, sometimes if you tell an employee, you know what, because you were honest, we lost that mandate or that part of the business, but that was the right thing to do. You set a precedent, and other employees are more likely to follow. If the employee is being totally honest, and then you tell him, you lost a business because of that, and he has negative consequences, you get him fired or he has a reprimand, then you're telling the other employees, you know what, sometimes it's better to be dishonest. So you have to be very careful. They will follow your lead. If the owners of the business are committed to be transparent to their clients and employees, I think the rest of the crew will follow. They will follow the leader on that one. But it has to be in your DNA. It has to be part of the culture you're promoting.
Absolutely. So if we look at, and I like that advice, that basically you encourage your employees to do as you do.
Yeah, exactly. Walk the talk.
Exactly. So when you look at, so we talked about transparency, what it means and how we can implement it into our organization. We also kind of looked a little bit at the way that it, is always about building the relationships and keeping the relationships. And that's an excellent crisis preparedness strategy. I mean, if you got into more hot water or more an issue with this client or as any other clients, I would feel confident in knowing that you would be able to come out of it with, again, mutually beneficial relationship and direction. And it goes with actually something that I like to say and something that I like to talk about, which is crisis communications is more than just having a plan. It's part of good crisis communications comes with a corporate culture that has this honest foundation and understands what real relationships are, what they're worth, and how to develop them and keep them.
I agree 100%. The other thing is people tend to forget is that less and less it matters what company you're dealing with. More and more what matters is the people you're dealing with, because your client today might be your boss tomorrow. Your employee today might be your client tomorrow. So the transparency you build is not only for your business, it's for you as an individual. And if you're a company that is not completely transparent and honest, employees that tend to be transparent and honest won't be working for you very long, because once they find out, they will not want to compromise who they are. They will go and they will move and work for a company that promotes that kind of values, being transparency and honesty. So it's very important that as an employee, if you work for a big company, if to keep your job there, you have to be dishonest or not 100% dishonest, but not transparent, we'll say it like that. You have to think, okay, is it the kind of reputation I want to build for myself, the type of career I want, because it will make a big difference in the future. Because the small-time client you're dealing with today might be your boss or your big-time client or even your partner in a couple of years. And I know some people they come knocking my door, they want to be hired here or they want to work with us. And I remember from 10 years ago that, as clients, they were not that great. They have no chance of working with us today just because of that. Or I just call someone that knows them on LinkedIn and I get a feedback, and the feedback is 100% positive. So it's just too bad. And I know a lot of people do that in the industry, and
it's good business. It's good making good business choices.
Yeah. And you have to, like I say, you have to develop it for yourself, not just for your company, because the average span that someone will spend in a company these days is between 3 and 5 years. So they will change jobs quite often, especially in our industry. So to get hired at someplace else, being a good employee is not enough. Having the skills is not enough. Like, people want to hire people they can rely on, and if they want to be able to rely on you, you have to be transparent and honest and reliable. So it's part of the package. And if we have a choice at our company to hire someone that's very good skills and in terms of personality is so, or someone that's only good skills, is not a superstar, but his personality is really a fit. He's honest, he's transparent, he's hardworking, he has the same values, we go for that for sure, 100%. And a lot of thriving companies do exactly that. So if you're an employee today, something you have to keep in mind.
That's it's a good point. Good point for both sides of the conversation. So you talked about, you mentioned in passing your personal example or the example that you just had to deal with. And you said that a lot of companies probably wouldn't want to have given those intimate details to the client out of fear of whatever.
Yeah, because you put yourself at risk.
You do put yourself at risk. So, and it's, like everything, it's risk with good opportunities when you can manage that risk effectively. But so how can organizations I'm thinking in terms of crisis communications, you're thinking in terms of, in this particular case, an internal issue that you had with a client, which every company is subjected to, or at risk of. How can organizations who are scared of being fully transparent, where can they draw a line, or how could they, what is the limit? When is too much, and when is just the right amount, and how can you kind of develop that so that you could take away the fears that come along with it?
That's another good question. The first thing I would say is that if you're not transparent, you have just to realize that whatever you're hiding, sooner or later, and probably sooner than later, people will find out anyways. And then it's going to be a bigger problem because you will have tried to hide it. That's the first thing. Second thing is, human nature is very predictable, and you can know that like 99% of the time, people are very indulgent with other people who made a mistake and are coming out and they apologize and they're honest and they're transparent and say, you know what, we messed up, we're sorry, and they expose themselves. It's very exceptional that someone who's exposing himself or a company will expose themselves, they will get a hard retaliation. The retaliation from I would say the opponents or the crowd or whatever would be a lot harder if you're trying to hide it and they discover it without you disclosing the information. So it's kind of a good way to protect yourself, to be transparent and open. And you have to realize it's impossible to hide it anyways. Even the government of the United States is not able to hide everything. Guys like Edward Snowden come out and they tell stuff. And, they have all this big machine and they're trying to hide stuff all the time. If it's not possible for them, it's not possible for you. Just have to think like that. And like I said, people will be a lot more lenient in their reaction, very more complacent if you're honest and you open yourself. The other thing is how much you have to be transparent, how much it's too much, but it's hard. I think transparency is one of those values. You cannot go halfway. You have to be totally transparent or not transparent. It's not possible to do it halfway. So if companies are hesitant, what I would say is choose one area and be totally transparent in that area first. And then you can slowly expose the other areas. So for example, it's hard for most companies to be totally transparent with their employees, with like how much money they make, and I can understand. So maybe you can go first being totally transparent about the general direction. Is it profitable this year? Have you make a profit or a loss? And what are the objectives? The growth, you can start with that. You choose an area and you're transparent. You don't have to give all the details, but you can be totally honest and transparent about the information you share. But I don't think it's possible to do it halfway. But you can choose an area and then in that area, give it your all.
I agree completely. And I like that you can't go halfway with transparency. Yeah. It defeats the definition.
Exactly, and people will smell it anyways.
Absolutely. And like you said, the truth today especially just always comes out. And we see it so often in crisis management that there is no such thing as halfway. Halfway means that you're not the complete narrative of your own story, and somebody else will be. Because somebody else will either invent the information that you're not sharing or find it on their own, and then you'll have repercussions because it didn't come from you.
You will have to react. You will always be catching up, which is a very bad position to be in. You want to lead. You want to be following.
Absolutely. And with the speed at which news and information travels today, that's already a challenge. Why make it even more of a challenge for yourself?
Of course.
I have. I think of an old case study of Boingo, but earlier than that, Buffer. Buffer, the app. I don't know if you use it.
Nope.
It's an app. It's a cool app. I use it all the time. That every time you read a piece of an article or whatever it may be that you want to share on Twitter or wherever you want to share, you add it to your Buffer, and you have pre-developed, scheduled times, and it just goes into that slot, and it'll tweet it out, at the next time that Buffer says is your next time. So Buffer is an awesome app. And they recently had a crisis, not a crisis, it could have been a crisis, but an internal, I can't remember if it was a hack or a total glitch that they were responsible for. And I didn't know about it, even though I'm a user. However, early in the morning, I woke up and I had an email from them that before I even heard about it from a third party, they had me as their email, as a subscriber through email, and they sent all of their customers an email saying, here's what's happening, we're so sorry, here's what we're doing to fix it, and here's how we're going to make sure it never happens again, and we will keep you updated. So right before I could even go oh crap, my information is insecure or whatever the case was, I was saying, wow, they've already taken care of it. And they were honest and transparent about it. And it made me respect them and trust them even more to continue to provide them with my confidential information.
Wow.
It's transparency goes a long way in crisis preparedness, prevention, and management. And then every other aspect of business relationships.
It was a good move because I guess now you trust them even more and you have more respect for them.
Absolutely. And they have my credit card information, so I could have easily withdrawn it. And instead I choose to continue to trust them because they showed that they also had the compassion. So they showed that they really cared. And that's another thing, is that with transparency, you're showing compassion. You're showing that you respect and care enough about your audiences that you want to be honest with them. For me, personally, honesty is the biggest form of respect. So why not show it to our audiences when...
Yeah, audiences will respect that, and will choose more and more companies and business with values they want to encourage. So now we have the choice to buy almost from everyone at anywhere at almost any price. So it's not a question of selling cheaper and cheaper because that slot is already taken and it's a losing proposition to sell cheaper and cheaper. But a lot of people start to buy from companies whose value they respect, and transparency is a big value that people like and respect. And if you're transparent, they will buy from you instead of buying from someone else who's maybe cheaper, by 5 or 10%. So it's something to keep in mind as company. A lot of companies now these days, new trendy companies, they work on that. Companies like Patagonia, for example, they set a standard of being transparent, honest, and making the world a better place. And clients are very respect that and stick with them. They're very attached to these companies because of that.
You create loyalty, advocacy. So we're talking a lot about transparency in issues. Right? So, when you have an issue, to be transparent, to resolve the issue. Now, how can you prove that you're a transparent company, whether to your internal stakeholders or external ones, without being faced with an issue? So what are some guidelines that maybe somebody listening is saying, our company is based on transparency and we're really, really transparent, but we've never really had to prove that or show that, and I don't know if our external audiences know that they can expect that of us. How can we show it without showing it, without crossing lines? Or what would you recommend as an everyday form of communication that shares this with your audiences so that they know they can truly trust you?
My God, you have a lot of good questions.
Thanks.
I think the first thing I see would be to maybe go one step further than what your clients or partner are asking you. If they're asking for something, you try to anticipate and to give them, in terms of transparency, go one step further. I'm just trying to look for an example how to illustrate that. But if you're working with someone, for example, and you're signing up a deal and you're negotiating and they're not asking for you any more than just negotiating a deal, for example, you could be totally honest and tell them, you know what, my margin is that, I can go that far. And if it's a long-term client, they respect you, okay, that's as far as they can go. But be honest, but you ask them at the same time, you know what, I don't want to work for free and I have no margin, so give me some margin on that and I can work with that. And they will be surprised because they didn't ask you how much margin you are making. But once they know, then there's a basis for discussion. They will, okay, he was honest with us and we didn't ask, but he provided it to us. So if you can, always, maybe when you start, go one step further and give more info than the other person requested, then you start, first you start on the basis, you know what, I'm transparent, but also it shows confidence, not only transparency, because you're confident that you're honest and you have good intentions, and in life you're not afraid, you will succeed, and people are attracted by that as well.
I like that answer. Another example or a company that I think of often that comes to mind is Zappos with their external audiences. Do you know Zappos?
Yep.
They have their corporate culture is amazing, and it's one that when you look on their website, they have the About Us video is just of their employees, pretty much. The CEO's on there, but it's really about their employees and about how the corporate culture of the organization is to go above and beyond to be helpful to anybody, and how that has transformed into employees who are, on a personal errand on a Saturday morning will go the extra mile to now hold the door open for somebody, just because they're so used to, they that positive energy, that transparency, that commitment to go above and beyond that they work with 40 hours a week.
But it's part of the culture, and also it has an impact on employees. It's transformed them because the people you work with and the environment you're in, like at some point, it sticks to you. You become like the people you work with and you spend a lot of time with. If you're surrounded by people who are transparent and generous, you'll become like that. And if you don't fit in that culture, anyways, you're going to leave. But if you have these qualities, it will just enhance them to be with people just like that. So I'm not surprised. It's a good side effect.
Yeah, it's definitely a good side effect, and it goes a long way. And that's what I mean when you develop this type of corporate culture. Crisis management is more than a plan. Yeah, it becomes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's being transparent. It's good business because in the long term it pays a lot, but also it's a good thing as an individual because you're making the world a better place over the long run. So it's win-win.
Absolutely. So with everything that we've discussed, we've looked at all angles, I think, of transparency. First of all, is there anything that you think that we missed?
No, I think your questions were pretty good. We covered almost everything.
Yeah, kind of all aspects, eh? And I love it because it's a word, transparency is a word that we hear so often, all the time, when you're talking about business relationships or consumer relationships or just communications in general. When you're in the business world, everybody is preaching transparency, especially even in my world of crisis management. We're always saying it, but I often think, do people truly, truly understand what that means and how to go about developing that as part of a way of life rather than a way of more than just a way of communication?
Exactly, and it's easy to say. It might be harder to implement. You have to remind yourself that one of the big fails in terms of transparency in the last year is a company called Enron, and their values in their conference room, there was transparency, honesty, and hard work, but it was just written on the wall. In the corporate culture, it was not rewarded. So as a company, it's one thing to say that transparency is among your values, but the thing is, do you reward that type of behavior among your troops? And that's where the difference is. And if you go and the spokesperson for a company can say, okay, we are very transparent, we're honest, blah, blah, blah. You go and you speak with the employees, then you get a different idea. Maybe it's, okay, yeah, that's how it works here. Maybe it's, no, that's not rewarded here. It's not what is valued at this company. So yeah, it's very important that you implement it and that you reward the employees that are like that. Otherwise, it's going to be an empty word on a conference wall.
I like that. I think that's the missing clue that you didn't mention. So Jean-Michel, where can everybody find and follow you?
Yeah, u92.com. That's a website for the company, and they can also follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. So it's on Twitter it's Ghoussoub, and it's hard to spell, so I'll spare you the info.
There'll be links.
From U92 that will find me. It's the link is there on my profile on the U92 website. It's easier. And on LinkedIn as well. If you just type U92 on LinkedIn, you'll find us.
And there will be, of course, links below this podcast on the blog, on iTunes, and on Stitcher.
Good.
Awesome. So thank you so much for talking about this important topic with me.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast. We appreciate all of your support, so if you could share this podcast with colleagues, friends, or anybody that you think would benefit from listening to it, we'd really appreciate you doing so. Also, if you could head on over to iTunes and or Stitcher to leave us a review so that other people who are interested in listening to the podcast can hear directly from you on what to expect and what you think of the podcast, we would really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions on topics of crisis communication that you'd like to hear us discuss, feel free to email us anytime at crisis@agnesday.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and I look forward to talking even more crisis intelligence with you next Sunday.